Welcome to What Matters, a podcast that looks inward at unique experiences, upward for divine direction, and outward at God's activity in our world. I'm Michelle Funk, your host, and I'm so glad you're here joining us today on the podcast. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. I'm delighted to introduce you to someone whom I am just getting to meet as well, Rebeca Chow, who has just joined the staff here at Church of the Resurrection. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. So
Thank you.
so tell us, what are you doing on staff here? What is your position? And I'm going to ask you lots of questions, so just get ready for that.
That sounds good. I'm excited about it. Like you're saying, my name is Dr. Rebecca Chow. And before I start talking a little bit about my position here, I am originally from Costa Rica. And I moved here about 25 years ago to work in counseling. So all of my career has truly been working with adults and children and families who have experienced life's biggest hurts or experienced situations that sometimes could be challenging. So as part of all of my, the steps that have led me here, I had this big calling to be able to work with people at their worst, because a lot of us, when we're struggling with something, being able to be there for a person when they need it the most has always been my passion and my call, not as a pastor, but as a therapist. So I am the clinical director of services here at Church of the Resurrection. I oversee our interns, and the clinical services that they provide.
Yay. Welcome to the
Thank
staff.
you. I'm
Welcome
excited.
to this area. Have you lived in this area for a
Yes.
while? Okay.
Yeah. And we have been members of Church of the
Okay.
Resurrection for about, I want to say 12 years.
Great.
So it's been quite a bit. And I have always felt the calling of being able to work here and be able to complement the amazing job that the church already does. And I always thought there is something that has to do with clinical services that at one point is just going to be the right fit. And then the position became open. So I'm excited.
Oh, me too. Me too. So the clinical services, counseling.
Mhm.
So I don't know if anybody's like me, but I think I know what that
Yeah.
means, but I think it means more than I can, even list. And so tell us just a little bit about the services and what is available to Church of the Resurrection members, to the community. We'll start
Absolutely.
there.
Well, one of the things that is really interesting is many cases during our development, we go to times where maybe something seems a little bit, I like to call it wonky, which means you're doing day-to-day things, but maybe things are just not matching. For children, that looks like behavioral concerns, right? Maybe they are not following the instructions, or maybe they are having a little bit of a hard time explaining how they feel inside. And that's what play therapy or counseling for children look like. That a parent, a caregiver, a grandparent maybe notice that something, it just doesn't really feel right. With kids, most of the time, that looks just the way that they interact with their outside world. And usually at that time, you find a therapist that knows how to utilize toys. And I always tell people what a play therapist does, it takes whatever is going on with the child and takes, like an interpreter, takes whatever they do with the toys and interpret it so that the adult can understand. So counseling for a child means being able to come in, express what is happening in their inner world through toys in the outer world. For adolescents, it's pretty much the same. Many times adolescence is one of the biggest developmental stage for us, right? Nothing really feels right. We're trying to understand who we are as individuals, but also as part of a family or a community. And in that time, sometimes we need just a little bit of a tune-up. Sometimes adolescents, I don't know if this has been your experience, but you ask him, how was your day? Fine. What did you eat? Nothing. Did you like how school was? No. And in many cases, they need somebody that maybe they feel that can build a relationship to be able to work on some of the things that might not be feeling truly go the way they really want to. Adolescence is hard because you're experiencing not only your life changes, but all of a sudden you have to choose what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And that can be on itself a developmental stage that can be hard. As adults, Sometimes we go through things that we were not expecting that was going to happen, right?
Mhm,
We have to change a job, we become parents,
mhm.
we become parents of teenagers,
Yeah.
we become sports moms.
Right.
Sometimes, as moms, we transition from being working moms to stay at home moms.
Mm.
Sometimes we do both. So, counseling is really an opportunity for a, an adult to come in and just have somebody that is unconditionally accepting, that can hear what you're going through. And I always like to tell people that a therapist or a counselor is just somebody that is walking with you and is kind of holding you through the storm, but really allowing you a safe space for you to kind of get your bearings and understand what's going on in your life. That could be one type of counseling. The other one is maybe for people who have experienced a hurt when they were growing up. A traumatic event is something that Dr. Peter Levine talks a lot about, is something that happened too fast, too soon, too much. And what that means is sometimes we have experienced things like neglect, or maybe being with caregivers that were not fully present. Sometimes it could be transitions, immigration issues, understanding maybe some of the bigger traumatic events, events that were fully out of our control. And what happens with that is, as we're growing up, the things that I was just describing in childhood and adolescence and adulthood, what happens is, because of a traumatic event, things just keep piling and piling and piling. And in those situations, you really need somebody that can not only walk with you, but help you understand how your childhood or the experiences that you have had in the past have affected the way you are today.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
And help to process
Help to process.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell people life is really sometimes like being um, in a storm.
Mhm.
So sometimes you know the path you're taking. It's kind of clear where you're going, but because there is so many things happening at the same time, sometimes it's kind of hard to clear where is south, where is east, where is north. And counseling can really provide that opportunity for you to be able to ground yourself, take a little bit of a breath before you know what the next step is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a very helpful image
Mhm.
because you're right. Storms do come,
Yeah,
in life, and navigating them is, is so important to do.
yeah.
So you probably don't do all of this work by yourself.
No.
Yeah, yeah. So you partner with local counselors, therapists?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right now, the services that we provide at CORE are more short term. So we have a team of 10 to 15 interns that go to different local schools. We have partnered with universities that have students that are in their second or third year of graduate school in counseling, and they are in staff. They come in, they have a caseload of 10 clients, and in CORE, we actually provide 15 sessions, 15 free sessions with our interns. And we can also provide another set of 15 sessions. So anything between 15 to 30 sessions of free counseling services. We also provide play therapy, which is another important service that sometimes is not provided that much out there in the community.
Yeah.
Dr. Mary Fry oversees the play therapy interns, and she has been involved in CORE for many, many, many years. Um, However, like I was saying, depending on your path and the storm that you're going through, sometimes you do need a little bit more of extra help or something that will be more long term. And for that, CORE has done such an amazing job of creating different partnerships. So we have different partnerships with community centers where we can refer for something that might be more specialized. So if there is anything that really needs a little bit more of a specialization, or needs maybe a counselor that is more a focus on that specific area, we refer out to different community centers. So, for example, we have had some calls from people that need maybe a center that have psychiatric help and also assessments and evaluation. Then, in those cases, we refer them to a list of amazing practitioners out in the area.
Oh, that's nice and amazing with
Mhm.
all of the contacts and the way that you can connect those dots as
Mhm.
necessary. Yeah. So, you've just gotten started.
Yes, a couple of weeks.
I know, I know. And so this is probably unfair to ask, but, like, what would you tell someone if, what's like the first step if someone speaks up to say, I'm going
Mhm,
through a really difficult time.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
what would you tell someone as far as like how to get started?
Absolutely.
Receiving.
I think for counseling services, the main key at the beginning is to understand we all have experienced a huge traumatic event. I have all been a therapist for over 22 years, and I do tons of presentations and stuff. When I go and collaborate with agencies around the area, I will know that if I'm going to a school district, or a community area, I will be talking about trauma, and I will be talking about maybe 20% of the 100 people that show up for that, right?
Mhm.
And I did that all before the pandemic. There was a huge shift after the pandemic happened, because I went from having maybe 20% of the population experience a traumatic event, childhood trauma, or a loss of someone in between, to having 100% of people who have experienced a huge traumatic event because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think the first key element is to understand it is okay to feel like you don't really have a solution for something. It is okay to give yourself the space to know, is this what I have going on right now? Do I like this? I can talk as a mom. I am a play therapist. I've been a therapist for 22 years. There is not a time in my life or a night in my life when I go to sleep and I think I rocked it today. Every single time I lay down, I thought, oh, I could have done this differently, or I wish I have done this. Even life transitions, like, you know, a kid going from middle school to high school, or not really know what to do with your 1 year old, really loving the fact that you have your child, but at the same time feeling totally overwhelmed because things are not working out the way you wanted. All of those little things that are starting to happen, instead of pushing those away, giving yourself the space to really realize, is this okay? Do I feel content? Do I feel happy? And the most important thing is, I know that for many people, reaching out for services is, well, counseling is for maybe the crazy people, or the people that have experienced, something really bad. My parents were loving, or, we come up with all of these excuses. We don't come up with those excuses when we have something physical going on, right? Like if my finger starts turning purple, I immediately will say, I need to go somewhere
Right.
because something is not right with this finger. It's not supposed to be purple. But for some reason, for mental health issues, we think, oh, don't be a baby. You don't really need any help. When in reality, specifically after the pandemic, but even before then, not feeling right, having fear that really is not, you feel like something is not right, reaching out for help is so important. What I have found out is we all feel that way, but for some reason there is this big sense of shame. It's like, if I say it to so and so, I mean, they're going to think that I'm a bad person,
Yeah.
or a mom, a bad dad, or
Mhm.
that I am a bad teenager, or I don't want anybody to know that I struggle with anxiety, because what will they think about me?
Yeah.
When in reality, 100% of the time, when you say, you know what, I get really nervous about this, I can assure you there has never been a time when I talk even with my friends and I said, you know what, I feel like I'm not doing this very well. They turn around and say, me too.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest keys about this,
Right.
is most of the mental health issues that we were just talking about are so important to be able to be addressed. But we always in fear of, if I say this, what are people going to think about me?
Yeah. 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 And I think as people, I know
Mhm.
I can do this.
Yeah,
I turn to something.
yeah.
I might turn to watching way too much TV
Yes.
instead of really kind of sitting in some discomfort and working through it. Or it could be turning to I turn to exercise when I need
Yeah.
to relieve some stress. And so turning to professional help, to
Hmm.
counseling, especially with regard to our mental health, it's just as important to do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what I always tell people is when you have something that doesn't feel right, right? So you push it in, that works, right? The
Yeah.
first time.
The first
Then you
time,
do
right.
that the second time and it works.
And
But
then you run out of room. Don't go
yes.
anywhere.
And then the thing that before used to help you out, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, in my specific case, would be fried food. I
Mhm.
know when something's wobbly inside of me because I'm thinking, oh, you know what? And some fresh fries will be so delicious, right? Like you're saying,
It'll fix all things.
yeah. And during the pandemic, even during the pandemic, I read so many books.
Yeah.
And then my family was always telling me, we have never seen you read this much. But you know what? The books really allow me to disconnect with what was happening.
Yeah.
Because we have seen those movies, right?
Right.
The ones where it's like the deja vu game. Everything continues to happen
Yeah.
the same thing over and over.
Right.
But it's a movie.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're in this period when it is truly like the movie. You get up, you make your coffee, you make breakfast, you're with your family, you
Mhm.
do lunch, and then there is this, the next day is the very same thing.
Yeah.
So, what happens is because of what we just experienced, our coping mechanisms, which is the fried food,
Mhm.
the exercise,
Mhm.
the reading,
Mhm.
and those are very socially acceptable, right?
Right.
There is some others that are a little
Right.
bit more tricky
Right.
that can help. Counseling can really help with those. But as you start thinking about some of these things, once you have used them and they don't fulfill the need that you have because you're pushing, every time we push something and we quiet something, the problem is it's only going to get louder.
Yeah.
So then the French fries did not do it for me anymore. It was French fries and also a hamburger, and then sometimes maybe some chicken nuggets. So you start amping things because the voice keep getting louder, and you need to fill it out with something.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key about this is having coping skills that really allows us to deal with some of the anxiety or any type of feeling that we're having, even happiness is great.
Yeah.
The problem is when we're not addressing what is behind that feeling, which is usually what gets us in trouble.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Right. And that's what counseling can do. It can
Yes.
help us address that,
Mm-hmm.
recognize it,
Mm-hmm.
process it, and then move maybe beyond it, or at least through it, or move
Absolutely.
instead of, like you said, just keep pushing it down and
Yeah.
down and down. Yeah.
And it has been my experience that most of the time, just the insight of knowing, oh, wait, I never realized that I used to do this. Or, oh, wait, you're right. Every time that I get in a fight with my significant other, or every time that I go through these issues that keep coming up in a cyclical manner in my life, I do that. I have never thought about that. That is usually the first step, acknowledging something is not right.
Yeah.
And then counseling can really provide that opportunity to gain some insight. Why do I do this?
Mhm.
Most of us do it without really knowing why
Yeah.
we do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key of being able to have some self understanding. Oh, I do this because
Mhm.
of this part of myself.
Right. Right. So paying attention to some signals too is really
Absolutely.
helpful, like not being able to sleep or change of
Mm-hmm.
appetite,
Mm-hmm.
or just like the what it is you're spending your time doing. And
Yes.
certainly unhealthy practices, drinking, all
Mm-hmm.
all of that can really point the door to it's time to get a little bit of help and advice.
Absolutely.
In a
That's
good
what
way.
I always tell people is like a pendulum, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Too much, not good. Too little, also not good.
yeah,
So too much sleep,
yeah,
I need to look, why am I sleeping that much?
right.
Too little sleep,
Yeah,
only sleeping half an hour a day. That would be another thing.
yeah,
So in mental health, what we're trying to do consistently is bringing the two extremes into the middle,
yeah.
because then that provides the opportunity to really have some balance
Right.
Anything in excess or too little of it always provides, is not balanced enough.
Right. Right.
I always tell people that our brain functions in a way like a teeter totter. Is that how you say? Right?
Yes.
And then if we don't really have enough balance of good experiences and bad
Yeah.
experiences, it's either going to go either way.
Right.
So we really want to be able to have something that counteract the bad experiences we had, or something that can counteract the coping skills that we're utilizing for good or for bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you're right. The pandemic has only pronounced some
Mhm.
of that. So I bet right now we're things are magnified, right?
Yes.
How long do you think it's going to be before we really know the impact of the pandemic and have dealt with it?
Mhm.
I wonder how long is that going to take us?
Well, I think that
Oh,
is actually going to take us quite a bit.
yeah.
There is a lot of research going on. I want to talk a little bit about this because I think this is important just to address. There is a concept called surge capacity. Surge capacity has always been taught just for natural disasters. So the community members that go to natural disasters when there has been something, like a flood or a huge earthquake. So the doctors, the counselors, the pastors, all of those that go into natural disasters have something called surge capacity, which is the capacity to be in a stressful situation and have the coping skills to hear the horrors of what that devastation was for 2 weeks. Maybe you can stretch it. Our brain has been created to be in those conditions maybe for a month, the longest. What happens with that is after they are there for that period, then they come home and then we call it they fill their bucket. That means they come home, they're able to do activities that really replenish them and get them to a point when they feel really good and they have the coping skills to continue with their lives. So, search capacity is something that really we can experience even in situations like the pandemic. The problem with the pandemic is it wasn't 2 weeks,
That's right.
it wasn't 2 months,
Yeah.
it was a whole year.
Yeah.
And what happens when you had been exposed to something that was that traumatizing? For some of us, it was a personal experience with somebody that we knew, maybe a person of our family. For other of us, we're just being at home. But again, some of us experience the pandemic in a home where we still have our jobs or we still have some sort of a schedule and consistency. For some other people, there were a lot of financial repercussions. We know that neglect and domestic violence numbers really rise up during the pandemic. What happens with that is we never got the opportunity to refill ourselves.
Right.
We don't refill ourselves. What happens is we become activated. And what that says is we feel everything in extremes. So I wonder a lot of our listeners, and I bet you can relate to this, I can definitely relate to this, is my compassion for things is smaller. My fear, my feeling, sense of fear is activated. So I get in fear mode more than I used to do. I get angry a lot more often than I used to do before. Um, Once I go into my rants, I just keep going on it. And I am thinking, why am I ranting about this, right? It's like I shouldn't. But then I'm deep into it. And the worst thing is like you're kind of separated from your body because you realize you're ranting about something that is unnecessary, but then you cannot stop yourself. We see this a lot in the news. If you turn on the news, there's a lot more fights now.
Mhm.
There is a lot of people that are struggling with huge events. I have always told people that watching reality television is the best way to explain the brain because you can see people are having a great conversation and all of a sudden people are ripping their shirts apart. You see them in the baseball and the soccer fields. People are just very activated. What happens with that is after the year, it usually takes, which is where we are right now, the anniversary
Right.
is the time when things are going like, oh, we're going back to normal. The problem with going back to normal is after you had been through such a different way of communicating. I mean, even this,
Right.
being able to be so close
Right.
into a person,
Right.
some of our social cues we even have lost because we went from
Wear
using masks
masks.
to
Yeah.
now these.
Right.
And we realize things can never go back to normal because this is unprecedented. There is no
There's not
going
normal
back
to
to
go back
normal.
to.
We
Yeah.
will always remember this piece.
Yeah.
And what happens is we go through this period that usually lasts about 6 to 8 months, according to research, where we're trying to figure out, wait, this is the new normal.
Mhm.
And then the second anniversary comes in.
Yeah.
And that is truly when we are going to start seeing the repercussions of this pandemic,
Okay.
emotionally, physically.
Yeah.
That's when we're really going to be seeing a lot of the effects of this. We will see a lot of more physical issues coming up, blood pressure. Research is showing that a lot because we were under a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
It's not uncommon that there's going to be more stomach problems, migraines, all of those things that really is our body telling us, you just went through a huge transition into your life and life was never the same. So through the second anniversary, that's when we will see a lot of those physical things. And then that's when we are also going to start to see the impact on mental health. Because we're thinking, once we don't have to wear masks, once we can get together for you know, activities. Once I get to start going to church, then I'm going to be okay, which is true. But we forget that we still carry this year
Right.
of loss,
Right.
of grief, of learning how to relate to each other,
Yeah.
of understanding. And that's not even counting the impact, financial and social impact that maybe this or physical impact that the pandemic actually had on everybody.
Right. Yeah.
So it is expected that we will see a lot of social and emotional impact in children and adolescents during the school year and the next 5 years.
To come. Yeah.
Mhm,
Wow. You just can't snap your fingers and have it just poof go away. So
mhm,
that's why it's important that
mhm.
we know that there is counseling
Yes,
services available. And now might be the best time to look into
yes,
it and engage in
mhm.
some type of counseling or therapy to work through the next year in advance of that second anniversary. That's
Absolutely.
good.
And understanding that I have always felt like knowledge is power.
Mhm.
So people always ask, well, I don't really know, my kid might be experiencing this, my significant other might be experiencing this. But I don't know, am I just too oversensitive? And I always tell people, talking is never going to hurt.
Right.
Finding out information, if you notice some things about your child or your significant other,
Yeah.
talking with a trusted person.
Right.
Does your husband do this? Does your wife do this?
Mhm.
Does your boyfriend do this?
Mhm.
And being able to go like, yeah. And I said, how do you handle this? Because I'm to the end.
Yeah.
That might be the first step,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Or if you start noticing some things, I think teachers themselves had been, um, I have such respect for them because
Yeah.
being able to be in the school and manage all of these as they are learning how to do virtual learning for 5-year-olds,
Yeah.
that could not have been an easy task. But so I think teachers, school counselors, school social workers, administrators in the schools,
Yeah.
when the kids go back to school, being able to talk to them and say, you know what, I have been noticing this and so and so.
Right.
Can you keep an eye on this and let me know if you notice it too?
Yeah. Paying attention.
Paying
Yeah.
attention is key.
Yeah.
Paying attention, acknowledging that something maybe is a little bit not
Right.
the
Right.
right way,
Right.
and then seeking out resources either from trusted friends, calling core. One of the things that we have is, other than our intern services, we also have support groups. On Thursday we
Right.
have a great program,
Yeah.
and we are starting to really even think about how can we enlarge those programs against all the locations.
Yeah. That's
So
fantastic. So
always
we'll,
reaching out.
yes, yes. So we'll make sure that information is available. We'll have it linked
Absolutely.
up with our on YouTube as well as on
Mhm.
the website. So Rebecca, thank you. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad that you are here as part of the staff.
Mhm.
That you are going to show the way and remind us all of these important things. Observe, pay attention, speak up,
Mhm.
And when things are wonky, you
Yes.
said, I like that. When things are wonky, or that pendulum, I love that.
Yeah.
When you're living here in the extremes, it's
Mhm.
okay to say, I need a little help.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah.
And it's
So,
always, the challenging times
yeah,
always feel so much better when you have somebody that is right there with you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We were created that way by God.
That's right.
Our brain was created for
Yeah,
connection
right.
and relying on each other. And that is something that happens right from the moment of conception. So let's just embrace that part of who we are and what we were created to do. And then understanding that even if we're grown up, we still didn't need that person that can hold us when we can maybe not stand that straight.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. That's great. Oh, thank you,
Thank you
Rebecca.
for
It's a
having me.
joy to get to know you.
Yes, me too.
And welcome again to Church of the Resurrection and all of this newness to come.
Yes, I'm
It's a
excited.
perfect time to join in.
Yes.
So I'll close us up here. That was just so fantastic. That's what matters about mental health, about being proactive in your own health and well-being, and what is available for you. And we have some ways that we can connect you here at Church of the Resurrection, but wherever you are, reaching out is always a good thing. And talking never hurts.
No.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Funk, your host, and we'll see you next time on What Matters. Good
And
stuff. Good
yay.
stuff. Thank you. Well, if this was the way that we get to know each
Uh-huh.
other, I mean, we've got
Absolutely.
way more cool things to do ahead. So I
Yes.
think it's fun being now that I know you're willing to step out and say, yeah, I can do
Ah,
podcasts. Like nobody's business.
anything that you need. I think, well, I have some ideas, but
Yeah,
if at
yeah.
any point you